This podcast is intended to provide information for educational purposes only and to serve as a starting point for you to have a conversation with your personal physician. Nothing stated on this podcast should be considered medical advice. Consult with your physician before undertaking or changing any treatment plan.
One of the biggest problems with alcohol is that we don't have a way to turn it off. So if you go out to a party and you have a couple of drinks and you're a little bit tipsy, imagine if you could take a pill, sober up in 20 minutes, and drive home. I mean, it would be a game-changing medication if you could somehow do that. My theory about this drug is that it might do that for marijuana.
All right, welcome back, friends. Here we are at the Pound of Pure Weight Loss podcast. Is this the end of GLP-1 compounded meds?
It might be.
It might be.
Yeah.
You predicted this, right?
I did predict this. We had an episode. Not a lot of people watched that episode. I thought that was like some of our best stuff that we put out there.
Go back and watch it if you haven't.
Yes, it was right. Because we're going to actually check in and see how we did. But we made, I think, 10 predictions for the new year. And actually, as I kind of think, a lot of them, I think we were on. And one of them, we predicted that this year GLP-1 meds the compounded GLP-1 meds, which is the kind of Chinese knockoff drugs that we've talked about, which have pros and cons, that they would no longer be available. And so we've gotten some news, and we'll cover this a little bit later in this episode, that may actually be the case. There's been a brief stave of execution, but I think that the die is cast on this one. We'll talk more about it.
Yeah, very interesting. So what do we have for in the news?
So our in the news segment is about a new weight loss drug that's come out. It comes from the Global News Wire, and it says that Novo Nordisk, and the name of the drug is Monlunabant. And they just completed a phase 2A trial, and they successfully demonstrated that this medication, which is a pill, does cause weight loss. Again, the drug is Monlunabant.
It sounds German.
The drug is named, how do you say this? Monlunabant. Yeah, Monlunabant. And it's a small molecule, and what's interesting about this is that it is not a GLP-1 agonist. Like Mounjaro, Ozempic, all these other meds. This is a totally different class of medications. There's a lot to be excited about when we're talking about a different class of medications, because there's only so many different GLP-1s you can put out there. But that's like one pathway. But they see this in cancer treatments. With cancer treatments, what they look for is agents that work in different ways. And what happens is when you combine them, you can kind of use it to tweak the side effects. And so maybe bring the dose of the one down that's causing the worst side effects, and use another one that has a different side effect profile.
But still going at it from different pathways.
Exactly. So the idea, if we could have multiple pathways for these medications, and it wasn't just GLP-1s, we had another way. And that's how bariatric surgery works. Bariatric surgery doesn't just work along the GLP-1 pathway. There's I think they've identified 5 or 6 different biochemical pathways that are changed and altered by bariatric surgery. And that's why it's a more successful weight loss tool than the medications. So this is interesting because it targets the cannabinoid receptor. Now, there's 2 different types of cannabinoid receptors. There's a small molecule and a large molecule. There's actually another company working on a large molecule. But this medication is an inverse agonist. So an inverse agonist means it binds to the receptor, and it actually causes the receptor to act opposite of the way it normally does. So essentially, to some degree, it's a blocker, but biochemically, it's not exactly a blocker. And I don't know that anybody out there listening really needs to differentiate between the two. I can barely differentiate between the two. So it's the cannabinoid receptor. Do you know what another thing that's out there that triggers the cannabinoid receptor?
Let me think.
Cannabis. Yes, marijuana triggers the cannabinoid receptor. So this is working on one of the receptors that are altered when you use marijuana.
Very interesting.
So Novo Nordisk purchased this drug from another company for $1 billion. I think another important piece of news here is the company. This is Novo Nordisk. And so the problem is that we really have a duopoly right now, right? We've got Eli Lilly and we've got Novo Nordisk, and they control the entire obesity and really the two best diabetes drugs as well. And so what really needs to happen for the market to open up, for there to be more competition, is for us to get other companies in there. If we saw Pfizer or Roche have a drug out there, that would be really exciting to me, because now we start to see some competition between these large companies. Competition is going to bring the price down. But this is unfortunately owned by Novo Nordisk, so we're not going to get that same competition. So these meds, the other really interesting thing about this is it's a pill, not an injection.
And I think that's something that a lot of people have talked about being interested in learning more about.
One of the theories, I don't think it's going to hold up, but one of the theories is that you're going to lose the weight with the injections and then switch to a pill for the weight maintenance. There's been no clinical evidence to support that, but that's something people are thinking about. I'll be honest with you, we have a lot of people using these injections. Nobody really minds.
Yeah, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal. They don't hurt. It's once a week. If it was every day, that's a little bit different, but once a week, it takes, I think, about 30 seconds to do an injection. So I think we're probably putting a little bit more into this injection problem than we need to.
Well, maybe one of the other benefits would be that you wouldn't have to keep it cold.
And it's cheaper to make.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big, yes, you're right. That there's the storage, the transport, all of that is much simpler. And the half-life is going to be longer, and that it's cheaper to make as well. So
I guess we'll see.
So anyway, this medicine, they ran this trial. It was a phase 2A trial, which basically means they're starting to dig around different doses, and they're looking for safety, and they're looking for efficacy. What were the side effects? And did people actually lose weight? And so this receptor, this medication triggers these receptors, and they saw 6.5% total body weight loss at 16 weeks, which is okay.
Yeah.
That's not great.
What would it compare to some of the GLP-1s?
Well, Ozempic, and again, they stopped the study after 16 weeks, so we don't know. But if we look at semaglutide, we're looking at about 15% total body weight loss. If we look at tirzepatide, there's some studies out there showing up to 25% total body weight loss. It's definitely over 20. That's at a year. But most people lose, I would say they're probably losing about half the weight in the first 16 weeks. They also didn't talk about plateau or not. There's been some studies that said, and they did it for 12 weeks and there were no weight plateaus. They don't comment on whether there's weight plateaus or not. Mm-hmm. My suspicion is that this pathway is not going to be as effective as GLP-1. Mm-hmm. So there's been some concern about these drugs in the past. And the concern has been that there's been an increased risk in depression and suicidality when taking these medications. And they did see some non-GI side effects. The majority of the side effects were GI. And they're the typical ones that we see. They're heartburn, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting. And so there were GI side effects for sure, but there were also non-GI side effects. And we've seen this too with the GLP-1s. The GI side effects, people can kind of work through. Mm-hmm. It's the insomnia, it's the depression, it's the fatigue, it's these, and they're less common, thankfully. Mm-hmm. But those side effects tend to not go away. They tend to be a little bit more lifestyle altering, and we're seeing more people coming off the drugs for that. Yeah. So anyway, they saw anxiety, irritability, sleep disturbances with these meds.
Which is kind of the opposite, because some GLP-1 studies are showing the improvement of depression. Right?
They absolutely do, but they also show in some people that it worsens depression. Mm-hmm. And so, the thing about it, when you're dealing with side effects, it can be, our tolerance for side effects depends on what that side effect is. Right. If 1 out of every 100 people who takes GLP-1s end up, getting so suicidally depressed, that's bad.
It's not a good,
Even if 5 have an improvement in their mood, if 1 becomes suicidal, we tend to weigh the side effects much more than we weigh the benefits. Mm. And that's always a tricky discussion with patients. I mean, the nice thing about meds is that you can stop them, and typically the effect goes away. Yeah. But yes, there was anxiety, irritability, and sleep disturbances. Now, I have a theory about this.
What? Do tell.
Yes. So I just want to every time medicine comes along, a lot of things like, classic examples, Viagra, right, was originally going to be used as a hypertension, high blood pressure medicine. Turns out it has this other effect that people, got very excited about. Yeah. And so now here it is as an erectile dysfunction medication. My theory is that this probably isn't going to be a great weight loss med, that the side effects won't be great, the weight loss won't be great. Whether we can combine it with the GLP-1s, that data, I mean, if all of a sudden this was augmented a GLP-1 response, that might be interesting. My suspicion is we're not going to see this as a really great, amazing, game-changing weight loss med. But I think it might have another purpose. So just kind of humor me on this one, right?
I'm listening. I'm all ears.
Drinking and driving is a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
Huge problem. And so one of the biggest problems with alcohol is that we don't have a way to turn it off, right? And you got to sleep it off. It's only time. Time is the only way to make yourself less drunk. So if you go out to a party and you have a couple of drinks and you're a little bit tipsy, imagine if you could take a pill, sober up in 20 minutes, and drive home. That pill would be so life-saving.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it would allow, it would potentially reduce motor vehicle accidents, drunk driving. I mean, it would be a game-changing medication if you could somehow do that. My theory about this drug is that it might do that for marijuana. First of all, look at the side effects. They're like the opposite of the effects of marijuana. Instead of being like chill, you have anxiety, right? Although marijuana can also cause anxiety and can worsen it. Instead of being like relaxed, you're irritable. Instead of being like sleepy, you have sleep disturbances. So I'm just wondering if they're going to find a way to maybe, like, if someone uses marijuana, it's like, oh, I got to drive home, they could take a pill and be able to drive home safely and kind of have the effects wear off. That would to me, that would actually, as much as that kind of seems crazy, and you can talk about the moral responsibility, and I've talked about my thoughts about harm reduction, right? I mean, we can talk about, and I've talked about this with alcohol use after bariatric surgery and talking about it compared to marijuana. And so marijuana is less harmful than alcohol. Doesn't mean I support the use of marijuana. I don't think people out there should be using marijuana if they can avoid it, but I also know people do. And so
we live in the real world.
We live in the real world.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so my idea is maybe that's what this drug is going to end up doing. Just a little bit of a loose theory. Maybe I'll throw that into my 2025 prediction episode.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder what the turnaround time would be for that. Do you think like a decade?
It'd be a while.
Yeah.
It'd be a while. Although they're going to move forward with this drug. I mean, they're going to do a phase 2B study. And, the way they figured out Viagra was they gave this blood pressure pill and they were measuring everybody's blood pressure, and the blood pressure was like barely budging. And so scrap this drug. It's a waste. And so then they called all the people like, I'm sorry, we're going to cancel the trial. And the people are like, whoa, what are you doing here, buddy? Don't do that. Come on. I like this drug.
That's hilarious.
And that's how they kind of figured this out. So I guarantee you in one of these trials, someone's going to use marijuana at some point and be like, it doesn't work anymore, or something along those lines. Right. And so anyway, that's just my theory about this. But anyway, the more drugs we have, the better. I wish this was not Novo Nordisk, but another drug company, not Eli Lilly, a third drug company. Mm-hmm. My take on this pathway is it's probably not going to be a super valuable pathway, but maybe a secondary adjunct. Anyway. All right. So what do we have for nutrition this week, Zoe?
Yes. Well, we have an article from New York Times, and the title of the article is 10 Nutrition Myths Experts Wish Would Die. So all of them, I think, are very valuable.
They were good ones.
They were all really good. For the sake of time, we're not going to talk about all of them, but I picked out 3 that I figured we could dig a little bit deeper into that are really aligned with what we tell our patients and what we're telling you listening with our, what we recommend with nutrition. So the first one is myth number 3. Calories in, calories out is the most important factor for long-term weight gain. And we just know this simply not to be true. I picked out a little blurb here and said what's needed for maintaining a healthy weight is a shift from counting calories to prioritizing healthy eating overall. Quality over quantity. That's the money piece right there. Yeah. Quality over quantity. And we talk about that all the time with the metabolic reset diet. That's why we don't have our patients counting calories or hitting a specific calorie target, because if we can work with the body, metabolism, hunger cues, satiety signals in order to eat the volume of food that, you know, most people want to feel full. And if they're feeling hungry, then you're going to keep thinking about food, right?
Right.
But focusing on those whole, real, unprocessed foods, so that quality over the quantity. And I think we couldn't agree more with that.
I love to see that in the New York Times.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? Actually, just before this, I was on a support group, and somebody was asking about a specific, like a protein chips or protein bar or something like that. And I just kind of pulled some numbers out of thin air, right? And said, okay, for this number of calories, this amount of protein, blah, 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 and you have this small little bag of chips, protein chips. And then let's put on this other plate, let's put on 3 ounces of chicken and 2 cups of broccoli, and maybe even throw on there, you know, half a cup of quinoa and a quarter of an avocado or whatever. How would you feel if you ate that plate of food as opposed to those 15 chips in that tiny little bag? And for the same amount of quote, quote, nutrition, right? The calories and the macronutrients, but the digestion, the micronutrients, the fiber, all that other stuff, it's so much better for that long-term weight maintenance and, of course, weight loss.
Yeah. I sometimes I joke about, you know, the 100-calorie snack pack, right? We all know those 100-calorie snack packs of Oreos, right? It's not a real Oreo cookie. I think
it's a little crisp.
Yeah, it's just the outside part. It doesn't have any of the white part of the Oreo. And it's like 4 of them. I mean, there's like so few of these things in there. And then I also joke, well, there's a 100-calorie snack pack of spinach. Has anyone ever seen it? It's 1 pound. It's a huge Costco bag of spinach, has 100 calories in it. And so again, comparing how you're going to feel. If you ate that entire bag of spinach, you would be like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And you eat those 4 Oreo little, you know, just the outside parts, and you're like, what's next? Yeah. It does nothing for your satiety.
You need 4 more of those little 100-calorie packets. That's reminds me of another example I like to use a lot in our increasing your veggie intake support group that we have on the schedule. And it's like visualizing a slice of pizza. Now, of course, it's going to vary a lot depending on the pizza and what's on it and yada, yada. But if we think about, let's call it 400 calories for that slice of pizza, that's why it's easy to eat. You know, people eat 3 or 4 slices of pizza because you want to feel full from it. You don't feel full from that, but it's so calorie dense.
Right.
Do you want to guess how many cups of, I bet you can guess, but how many cups of broccoli it takes to get 400 calories?
I would guess, I'm going to guess that a cup of broccoli has 40 calories. That's my guess. So times 10, 400. How'd I do?
So you want to say 10?
10 cups of broccoli.
It's about like 8 to 10. Yeah. And then, like, think about that on a plate. Just I mean, your
10 cups, You
can't. I have a stomachache just thinking about it.
Yeah.
So thinking about that nutrient density as opposed to caloric density, that doesn't mean that you can't have a slice of pizza, but maybe it's, okay, I know that I'm not eating the pizza for the fullness, for the satiety, for the volume, but I can add, maybe I add 2 cups of broccoli to it or a side salad or something like that to kind of get both.
It's some other interesting things too. If you think of the largest mammals, right? Think about just cows, giraffes. What do they eat?
Grass.
Leaves. Yeah. That's all. I mean, they eat it all day long, but that's all they eat. So a lot of people are like, well, you can't get protein, you can't build muscle, but the largest animals are vegetarian. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's interesting. And one of the reasons for that is that calorie for calorie, spinach has more protein than steak.
I did not know that.
Yes.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, because, again, 100 calories of spinach is this giant Costco bag.
Right.
But 100 calories of steak is like 3 bites.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Especially if especially a more marbled piece of steak, it's going to have the fat in it and no protein. that you're going to actually get more protein from 100 calories of spinach. Now, again, that doesn't mean, ounce per ounce, steak has a lot more protein, but calorie per calorie, if you measure it out by calorie.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm really happy to see this. I think we're starting to finally get some penetration into the knowledge base that measuring calories is probably wasteful and not necessarily going to get out there. But there's still these Instagram guys who are like, you need to be in calorie deficit. And if you're not in calorie deficit, then you're not going to lose weight. And there's 3 things you got to do to lose weight. Calorie deficit is 1, calorie deficit is 2, and calorie deficit is 3. They're out there, right? They're always young men.
Yeah.
You notice that?
Yeah, maybe shirtless.
What? Maybe. It's always the young men who are pushing and promoting calorie restriction as a means of weight loss, because nobody has it easier when it comes to losing weight than young men.
No, that's true. Yeah.
So
anyway. So quality over quantity, people. We say that all the time. So then we kind of already touched on this with talking about the other one, but myth number 8 is the protein in plants is incomplete.
Yeah.
And it's not actually that the protein in plants is incomplete. They have all of the 20 amino acids that you need, but the difference is that the proportion of those amino acids. So that means you need to have a variety, which, if we think culturally, rice and beans going together, that creates a complete protein.
Right.
So it's, like you were just saying, biggest mammals are, plant-based. And so, yes, if you are not eating any animal protein, we need to have a variety of those plant-based protein sources.
Yeah. So, essentially the idea is if you're going to get plant-based protein, you should get some from beans, some from nuts,
right? Some
from even grains like rice. This has always bothered me. This idea that, that there's a certain number of essential amino acids. There's 20 amino acids. Amino acids are these little molecules, Zoe, that make up all the protein. You string them together and you make protein. And so we can make some of these, but we also can't make some of these. So we think. And so I think first of all, there's a limit to what we know about our biochemistry. And I think a lot of times these recommendations are made by someone who took Biochem 101 and they told me this in Biochem 101, so now I know it and it's true. But I think it's a complex issue, and I think there are probably pathways and ways that we can make some of these non-essential amino acids and out of carbohydrates, out of other compounds. And so that's always kind of bothered me a little bit about that, because I wonder if it is really true. I think that you probably can get by.
Yeah. Well, that leads directly into the last myth number 10 that I pulled is fundamental nutrition advice keeps changing a lot. And there's a lot that we don't know.
Right.
And the science is ever evolving. Nutritional sciences is a relatively young, study.
Right.
Right. But if we think about this is the quote here. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants.
Yeah, that's from Michael Pollan, I think, said that.
Yeah.
The Omnivore's Dilemma, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's where it came from.
So, the bottom line is that, yes, it's an evolving science, but if we boil it down to what we always say is try to eat as much whole, real, unprocessed food as much as possible. And this is aligned with that. And yes, it can be complicated, especially with everything online and different influencers, and you're getting information about this diet and you need that supplement. And it is confusing and it is overwhelming when we are taking all of these, all that white noise,
right,
taking up space. But if we boil it down to keeping it simple, it really doesn't need to change. It doesn't have to be complicated.
Yeah. It's sometimes it's the stuff your grandmother told you to do. That's really still, I think, the best nutritional advice. Eat your vegetables.
Right.
Right. That was been in the 50s, that was the big advice. Don't eat a lot of sweets. Right. And maybe don't eat the fattiest, greasiest meats. Things along those lines.
And portions. Think about the portion sizes in the 50s versus now.
Absolutely. But yeah, to me, I think part of there's 2 problems with it. The first problem is that doing hard nutrition science, double randomized, double-blinded, controlled trials is like impossible.
Right.
Like you would literally have to like keep someone captive and only feed them certain foods.
Yeah.
I mean, we have institutional review boards that review any type of scientific study that's done to make sure that it's ethical. And if you're going to really do hard science on nutrition, I don't think it would pass the mustard of any of these IRB boards.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just impossible to constantly, because we eat all through the day, the idea that all of your subjects are going to record every single thing they eat accurately.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just not possible. So I think the ability to get that kind of definitive answer that we can get with medications, we can get with surgery, we can get in other health fields, it's so much harder in nutrition, so much harder.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the first thing. The second thing is what you alluded to, which is that there's too much money to be made in selling processed crap. And it's such a great business model to take something heavily processed that people like to eat and somehow apply a health halo, like you always talk about, to that heavily processed food and somehow leverage some obscure scientific or pseudoscientific article that says somehow this would be helpful and good, like Lemmy Curb and chromium, right? That it's so easy to make money doing this.
Right.
And then strap a nice little marketing package on top of it, get some influencers behind it, and cha-ching.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's just such a reliable way to make money. And so that just clouds all the advice out there. So this is what's being pushed in front of us instead of good old fashioned advice, like the Jolly Green Giant. Like,
where's he?
Yeah. Where's he been? And I don't think he's, offering $1 million influencer deals.
Yeah. Something I was just thinking about as we were talking about like back in the 50s, if we think about the obesity trend,
right,
how much it has risen over the decades. But I would, and I don't have any graph in front of me, but I would put money on the fact that graph mirrors the rise in diet trends and different fad diets and that sort of thing. And we know that going on and off diets is one of those predictors of weight gain.
Right.
And that's part of the machine that is diet culture and this multi-billion-dollar industry. It's sell a product or a program to somebody knowing that it's and then they fail. They feel like they're a failure, right, but it's ultimately that failed them. And then it creates a more vulnerable and prey-worthy individual to continue buying more of these different products. Like, it's just so sad. And
you know what? We need an infographic.
Mm-hmm. That
infographic of try temporary diet, fail, become more susceptible to next diet fad, try, and that circle.
And then the weight goes, it's like a spiral up, like a little pigtail.
That probably describes 95% of the people listening to this podcast right now. Yeah, we need to put something like that together. I bet ChatGPT could probably make that happen like that. All right, so let's move into the economics of obesity segment, and this is where our title comes from. So here's what's happened recently. On October 2nd, the FDA has said that tirzepatide is no longer on shortage. Mm-hmm. So I think we've covered this in detail on a number of episodes in the past. And the 503B compounding pharmacies, which is who makes most of these compounded drugs. Again, quick primer on compounded medications. These are not produced by Eli Lilly or Novo Nordisk, which are the companies that hold the patents. They are produced overseas, almost exclusively in China, at FDA-approved facilities, but the products do not go through the same testing process that Zepbound and Wegovy go through. And so there's it's a gray market area. But because both tirzepatide and semaglutide are on shortage, these 503B compounding pharmacies are allowed to import the medication from China, not from the patent holding manufacturer, mix them together with something to make a novel compound and then sell it. And so they mix it with B12 or thiamine or something like that. And the truth is that adds absolutely nothing to the effect. But it allows them to sell it. Now, as soon as the shortage is resolved, this becomes illegal and it is a patent violation. So all of the compounding pharmacies want the shortage to last as long as possible. And of course, Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk want this shortage over. And we've talked about this recently in the release of vials. And so now Mounjaro and Zepbound are available to lower doses as vials as opposed to the injector pens. And that allowed Eli Lilly to meet their manufacturing needs because it's not the drug that's on shortage, it's the injector pens of all things. Yes. So the 503P compounding pharmacies are no longer able to produce tirzepatide. Now semaglutide is still on the shortage, but only for one dose. I think only for the 0.25 or the 0.5. And you can check the FDA-approved. So this is all like coming to an end.
And they're going to be like legally pursued.
You think?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, especially if they have Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk lighting a fire under their butt.
They already have. I mean, Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk have made it very clear that they will pursue aggressively with filing legal actions any physician's office or compounding pharmacy that is breaking their patent laws. I mean, they want no part of this.
And that means all of the like med spas and weight loss like that you can go and get.
If you're not getting your medication from an actual pharmacy,
prescribing provider,
you get a prescription, it goes to CVS, Walgreens, your Safeway, Kroger, wherever you're getting your prescriptions from. If you're not getting it from there, then it's very close to being no longer available. Months. But there's a little bit of action here. There's a little bit of stuff going on. So
more than getting your prescription from a doctor.
So the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding actually filed a lawsuit saying that no, you've prematurely, the FDA was unfairly influenced by Eli Lilly, and you prematurely put this drug and taken this drug off the shortage list when it's still going to be on shortage. Because look at all these people on compounding meds. There's no way you have the manufacturing capabilities to meet all of these people on the compounding meds. So they filed this lawsuit, and it's been filed in federal court. And actually, they got like a stay of execution. Yeah.
Oh. Wow.
So the FDA said, you know what? We're going to reevaluate this. So it's still okay for the 503B pharmacies to continue to produce and sell tirzepatide.
I feel like I've been on a roller coaster listening to this. Well, what's going to happen next?
But here's the thing. They're going to probably be able to push this off another month or two.
Well, that's it.
6 months maybe? I don't know. But not 10 years.
Right.
This whole compounding thing will be part of history, but it will not be the way that people get these medications. Not in the United States. There's other stuff we're going to talk about happening in other countries that are interesting. We'll cover those in future episodes. But as of right now, yes, they did get a little bit of a break, but it literally is a stay of execution. It is not a long-term win that's going to allow them to continue to produce these compounded medications for a long period of time. Lilly and Novo Nordisk will win this battle. They are, I mean, in terms of just scale, they are 100, 1,000 times wealthier than these compounding pharmacies. And they have and also the law is on their side. I mean, they do hold the patent.
Right.
And so they're going to win. That's probably bad for patients.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about how many people who utilize compounded meds.
Yeah. So let's say you're out there and you're using compounded meds. So let's talk about what you can do. So I think we're going to see this happen with tirzepatide before we see it with semaglutide, I think. So the compounded, there's places that have tirzepatide, there's places that have semaglutide, there's places that sell both. If you're using compounded tirzepatide, I think, potentially looking at moving to semaglutide might be the right thing to do right now. It's just going to kick the can down the road. It's not going to solve the problem a long time, but it is. We've talked about this in the past. We definitely work with patients creatively. We call them, our little code word for this is creative dosing strategies. And we do have people from all over the country reaching out to us. And we do have a program. It's called our Platinum program. There's a little bit of an upcharge, but truthfully, it's probably the same, if not cheaper, than using compounded meds.
Well, you broke down the cost in a previous episode of compounded versus, whatever. And, it's really not a big difference.
It's not that big of a difference if you get creative with it. Yeah. And so so like I said, even with our upcharge for the program fee, it probably still is over the long run cheaper. And this is a strategy we think we can continue for years,
right?
And we're not breaking any laws or rules or anything.
And it's not going to be legally taken away at the time.
I don't think so. No, I mean, the system is screwed up. And when a system is screwed up, you can sometimes take advantage of that to benefit you. Even though, it's a lot of what's happening is bad for patients, it can also be good for you if you kind of think creatively. Yeah. So anyway, that's what we do in our Platinum program. I think the third thing to consider is if you understand the metabolic effects of GLP-1 meds and how metabolic treatments are so much more effective than, strictly lifestyle, mindset, diet and exercise type things that we've been doing all along until surgery and meds came along. Then there's another metabolic treatment, and that's bariatric surgery. And the nice thing about bariatric surgery is they can't take it away from you, right? Once you have it, it's there. And so that's a way to get off the GLP-1 roller coaster. We see that a lot with our patients. We're like, I don't want to be on meds forever. I see it. It works. I understand obesity is a disease. I understand there's metabolic treatments. I don't want to be dealing with these meds and the cost and getting them and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to look at surgery. And I think we're going to start to see that as the decision-making is whether you want to be on the meds long-term or whether you want a surgery that kind of fixes it once and for all. The nice thing about surgery is we can do it so safely. Less than a 1% serious complication in our practice for these surgeries. So anyway, I do think that the compounded GLP-1s this is their final loop around the spiral. And that at some point in the near future, we're not going to have them. I don't know if I'm going to make my January 1st deadline. But I think we'll come close for a prediction episode.
We'll have to check back in about that when we do that.
Absolutely. All right.
Well, that's our show today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this was helpful. And if it was, we would love to have you share it with somebody that you think would find this show valuable as well. Our whole mission is to get this information out to as many people so we can help as many people as possible.
And we've been asking for reviews. We actually have a bunch of reviews now. Yeah. No, and they're actually pretty good. So that makes me happy. So thank you, all of you, for your reviews that you put out there on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're listening. And again, if you like this, please share it with other people. See you next time.